Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for holding the hearing today on Western's water supply outlook for the current water year. And as I've said before, water is the lifeblood of everything that we do in Wyoming, from cattle ranching to energy exploration, recreation, whether it's boating on Bighorn Lake, kayaking on Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Water is the cornerstone of our economy and livelihood. It's been mentioned today that the water outlook across the West and along the Colorado River is not looking good. And in Wyoming, we do have a different story. We have above average snowpack this winter and are anticipating healthy runoff this spring, so it allows us to focus on water management and water storage. So that's why I'm so pleased to have with us today Pat O'Toole with the Family Farm Alliance. He is a sheep and cattle rancher with his family in southern Wyoming along the Little Snake River, and I've known him for many years as a Wyoming member of the Wyoming legislature, and I know this year he was invited to address both the House and the Senate of the Wyoming legislature. He has been a great voice for the agriculture community in Wyoming, a leader in advancing water storage policy. So I'm delighted you're here. You may have noticed I had to go out for a few minutes. Pat, I was on a radio station KUGR with Al Harris out of Green River, and I was quoting you about how you said, what do? We raise cattle, sheep, horses, dogs, and children, and which is what happens in Wyoming. That's what we do. So I just would like to just ask a question, if I could. First, given your experience building a water storage project, what's preventing the development of new storage that would help in high runoff years?
Yes, sir. You know, in anticipation of this testimony, I met with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities 2 weeks ago and talked about their needs. Certainly agriculture is looking for increased storage virtually on every drainage, but so are the cities, and their understanding, I think you mentioned earlier, that on the big runoff years we have to catch more. So we're looking at Rob Roy and Houston Park and expansions of those reservoirs, because what we're seeing is this volatility of flows, whether it be in California or in Wyoming. You know, I think the great thing that Governor Meade did by saying 10 and 10, I mean, it's the message that Senator Murkowski mentioned. You know, we're messaging that it's a good thing, and it was Mr. Petty will appreciate the Idaho water users called yesterday, and they wanted to have somebody from Governor Meade's office come and talk in Idaho, because we speak about it openly, and we're doing it. And so the 10 reservoirs that are being built are a good example. And as I said earlier, in Colorado, I'm on a watershed group that every single watershed thinks that they have to have storage in the future. So, you know, this, to me, this hearing is just critically important, because it's finally saying what we have known, you know, for years and years, is that if we're not looking forward to, managing our watersheds, and as Ms. Zemer said and others, it's people come together. You don't get a project permitted without having a broad cross-section of players, whether it be the trout guys or the bird guys or the fisher. I mean, it's all together, and then we come up with a project that should be easily permittable. And I think the one we're looking at right now, Senator, could be an EA rather than EIS, which would be even a more facilitated process.
Yeah, and you do have a really strong reputation as being a leader in conservation and environmental programs. People have known you for that, certainly from the Wyoming legislature days, as well as nationally, including habitat preservation efforts. Can you speak a little bit about the assurance that the current environmental standards will be upheld if the permit process is streamlined?
If I might just expand a little bit, you know, when we talk about who's against it, why are we not moving forward, not just with storage, but with other issues? And I see a real distinction between the conservation groups that are represented here, that I work with all the time, and the litigators who have a different agenda. And I think what we're talking about, hopefully, in this administration, is that those partnerships that we're forming, for example, I talk about sometimes the myth of efficiency. We don't want to always be doing sprinklers. We want to do flood irrigation. There'll be an event in the Little Snake River, Senator Hicks, in 2 weeks, talking about how the balance between conservation practices, flood irrigation, recharge of rivers is all integrated with, in our particular ranch, we have a third sprinklers and 2/3 flood, because we're trying to do multiple things with the water. And I think that's the future, is understanding, you know, just how diverse, if you apply the water both in timing and volume, you can do multiple things with the resource.
Thanks. If I were going to go on the radio again, I would quote you just as you just said. The conservation groups who work together all the time and the litigators who have a very different agenda. So thanks so much. Thanks, Madam Chairman.